There you go. Okay, so um all right, I think we're all set. So to formally open the event, allow me to welcome, of course, no other than our PA 152 advisor, Dr. Elmer Soriana. Sir?
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for showing up on this Saturday afternoon. Alam ko malaking pakiusap ito for our panelists. It's a really big favor that we appreciate. And it also is an indicator na passionate kayo about this topic, no? Nag-sacrifice kayo ng oras niyo on a Saturday afternoon to spend time to discuss this topic. So the City Futures Lab is an initiative initiated out of the UP College of Public Administration and Governance. And we are setting up City Futures Labs in different cities. No? So meron tayong mga participants dito ngayon sa Taguig City Futures Lab. And we're hoping that at some point in the future, all 148 cities in the country will have a City Futures Lab. That's why yung talakayan natin ngayong hapon, no, in this live session, there will be around 25 of us. But this will be recorded and shared on YouTube. So we're hoping that, you know, this becomes parang seed of conversations in cities all over the country, no, sa Zamboanga, sa Davao, sa Tarlac, sa Tuguegarao. Itong recording of our brown bag discussion helps them start thinking through the applications of data analytics and artificial intelligence in their own cities. So we're looking forward to a really interesting conversation this afternoon. It's a 60-minute conversation, so we discussed with the team this morning how to compress the questions so that mas siksik at mas mayaman yung magiging talakayan natin in the 60 minutes that we have. So we're looking forward to this, and thank you very much ating mga panelists and participants for joining us this afternoon. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, sir. And indeed, we are looking forward to the long-term effects of discussions such as this. So, at this point, let us now proceed with the introduction of our dearest panelists for today's discussion on AI in Philippine Governance 2050. Let me call on my teammate, Kath, to introduce our panelists. Kath?
Hello, thank you so much, Karen. So good afternoon, everyone. Please allow me to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. So for our first panelist, we have Dr. Prospero C. Naval Jr., a Dado and Maria Banatao Professor of Artificial Intelligence at the Department of Computer Science, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Dr. Naval is the founder and the current laboratory head of the Computer Vision and Machine Intelligence Group of the same department, where he leads a group of research students focused on the application of machine learning to solve problems in healthcare, environment, and education. Dr. Naval is also the founder of Fisheye Analytics, a university spin-off they launched in late 2019, whose mission is to address pressing problems in marine biodiversity preservation by providing AI tools for environmental monitoring, assessment, and rehabilitation. Currently, his research interests include underwater computer vision, intelligent control of underwater autonomous vehicles, swarm robotics and computation, and deep reinforcement learning. Let us all welcome Dr. Prospero C. Naval Jr. Hi, sir. Good afternoon po.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir. So for our next panelist, we have Mr. Dominic Doc Ligot, a data analyst, researcher, software developer, entrepreneur, technologist, and an advocate also for data literacy, data ethics, and social impact from data. Mr. Ligot founded Therolithics, a social impact data analytics company, and co-founded Data Ethics PH, an online community focused on social issues such as data privacy, data security, AI-driven discrimination, data liabilities, data ownership rights, and data poverty. He also co-founded the Analytics Association of the Philippines and is a Board of Trustees member of the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. Mr. Ligot's teams are back-to-back global winners in the NASA International Space Apps Challenge for data-driven dengue surveillance and COVID-19 global pandemic response monitoring. They are also the global winner of the Technology Award in the EO Dashboard Hackathon for Mobility and Air Quality. Mr. Ligon holds postgraduates in data-driven marketing and advanced marketing research from Cornell University, clinical epidemiology from Utrecht University, and a degree in business administration from the University of the Philippines. His current work focuses on human rights, public health, food security, political risk, and fighting disinformation and codemics through the use of computational social science, social listening, remote sensing, artificial intelligence, and data engineering. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Dominic Doc Ligot.
Hi, magandang hapon sa lahat.
Magandang hapon po, sir. And the last but definitely not the least, we have Mr. Raymond Gerard de Asis. Mr. de Asis is a career officer of the Department of the Interior and Local Government. He is currently assigned to the DILG Las Piñas Field Office as cluster head and was formerly the head of the Innovation, Solutions, and Urban Governance section of DILG NCR's Capability Development Division. He graduated from the Ateneo de Manila University in 2013 and received his Master of Public Administration from the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies in 2020. Everyone, let's welcome Mr. Raymond de Asis.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Karen.
Right. So thank you so much for introducing our panelists, Kat. Okay, so we all heard their um credentials, right? So sobrang grabe pala yung mga panelists natin. I'm sure everyone is excited to hear their insights and perspectives. So without further ado, let's now proceed to the panel discussion. We will be flashing the questions on the screen and the panelists will take turns in answering them. Okay, so for our first question, yan. So our first question will revolve around their point of view or perspective on the incorporation of AI in governance. So we have academic perspective, private perspective, and government perspective. So maybe we can hear from Professor Naval first, and then Sir Ligot, and then Sir Raymond.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So, um, well, first of all, thank you for coming and listening to our brown bag discussion this afternoon. So I'm going to talk mainly about AI in governance, mainly from the perspective of the Academe. So first, let me tell you our experience in my laboratory. So I actually started the AI laboratory way back in 1999. So we've been doing AI for the past 23 years already. So when we started, people were not paying attention to us. It's like a curiosity. What is AI? And we really didn't mind. No? So we were just churning out AI algorithms, playing around with these AI algorithms, hoping that one day these programs will or might perhaps turn out useful. So we were playing around with all sorts of data, from music to images, videos, medical records, medical data, all sorts of data. So over the course of these 22 years, we've had more than 250 projects in artificial intelligence. Um, and these are not just papers. In fact, most of them were actual AI projects. They're running, so programs that are actually running. Uh, we also, of course, published. We have more than probably 100, over 100, maybe 120 or so publications. So these are the better ones, we might say, the ones that are published, and then the rest are probably half. Practically half of the total number were actually published in different journals and presented in numerous conferences. So that's our perspective, our experience rather, from the academics. We've been doing AI for the past 23 years. So to say that AI is something new in the Philippines is actually not completely true, because we've been doing that for more than 2 decades already. So now, regarding AI in governance, well, it's really something both old and new. Old because we actually know the algorithms are directly applicable to AI in governance. And these very same algorithms can actually be repurposed to address important pressing issues in governance. So most of our projects, especially in recent years, have focused on the application of AI in medicine, in healthcare. So we've had probably 50 or so, even more, I've lost count, of medical-related research, medical and even biology, biological. So medical informatics, and it's a term that's not really common. It's computation. It's called computational biology and bioinformatics. So we've been doing that since, especially bioinformatics, we've been doing that since early 2000. Now, these algorithms can actually be repurposed to assist government in governance. The possibilities are endless, actually. So, for example, say for the commission and audit, they have a lot of things to do. So, very often there are huge delays in the auditing of projects. So we have projects with the UST, and it takes, the audits are made available, are only done after maybe 2 years or 3 years. So can we do something about it? Definitely we can do something about that using artificial intelligence methods. How will government address better the needs of the people in general? Of course, through feedback, through consultation. And one very important technology that we could use right now is the use of chatbots. So citizens can actually interact directly with chatbots, and these chatbots could collect data and gather data and even answer some of the questions, most of the questions perhaps. So there's just an example. And then we can talk about what's called lawbot, Sounds like robot, So, but it's lawbot, okay, which means lawyer, okay. So these are like chatbots which are specialized in legal, anything that's about the law. So if you're not sure, you can consult these law bots and you get your answers. So practically anything that is repetitive can be automated using this artificial software agents, chatbots. So a lot of things can actually be done. The possibilities are endless, and 1 hour would not be enough to just to talk about these things. So I think just a short introduction of the possibilities of the use of AI in governance. No, I'm sure the other speakers will have many other things to say as well, to complement what I've said. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very insightful sharing, Professor Naval. It's interesting to know na hindi pala bago yung paggamit ng AI here and even in the Philippines, no? 20 plus years na pala siya. So, ayun, I think it's important na we embrace these technologies, especially na yung trends, we can see the trends that are already going to that direction. So, that's from the academic perspective from Professor Naval. Now let's hear from the private perspective naman from Sir Ligot.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I'll just piggyback on Professor Naval's thoughts. No? Maybe from a private sector standpoint, the practice of AI is not new, but I think the organizations, namely our corporates, lalo na the small and medium enterprise, I think that's where the innovation needs to happen. The adoption of the AI is a big question. And I think there are several maybe ways to attack it. We talk a lot about this in the Analytics Association of the Philippines. I think the big bugbear that most companies, siguro in the past maybe 5 years pa lang, have struggled with is really getting definitions straight. Because when you talk about artificial intelligence, it's actually very, very strongly interlocked with business intelligence and statistics, because they all use data, and I think that's where companies should really start fixing their data first, and then you can find all these opportunities to automate. And I think automation itself is not also new. We've been automating, for example, stuff in factories for ages. No, I think what makes it different when you do automation versus intelligent automation. Traditional automation is really looking at, sabi nga ni Professor Naval, something repetitive. But where AI can add additional efficiency is, although the general process is repetitive, the actual conditions surrounding a process may vary slightly. No? Parang ano yan, parang weather, no? You know generally when the rainy season is and the sunny season is, but as to when exactly it will happen, it can vary. So you need systems that are smart enough to spot a repetitive pattern, but also smart enough to adjust. That's kind of the general principle behind AI automation. Now I'll dive directly to add to Professor Naval's point. When we talk about governance, I think there's at least two angles to this. One is governance of, let's say, a company, or governance of a business, and second is governance of the AI itself. Now, those are slightly different things. When you talk about governance of a company, this is everything from financial governance, corporate governance, risk management. I think AI can have a lot of opportunities to bring to the table, because AI is essentially learning from the past, no? Looking at past data and then adjusting or giving recommendations as to how to proceed in the near future. And I think corporates struggle with this. Number one, most corporates struggle with gathering past data, and most decision making, I'm just generalizing, is still driven by emotion and politics and basically tradition. So it's a big leap to go from, I would say, expert driven decisions to automated decisions. Malaking jump. Because you also have to trust the algorithm, and algorithms will make mistakes. So that's a big, I would say, cultural change for a company. Are you ready to make mistakes? And the essence of it is to make less and less mistakes over time, kasi nagla-learn. Now, the governance of the AI itself, I think that's a deeper topic. I would be really curious to hear the other panelists beyond this, because managing AI, let's say in a project or in an experiment, the moment you put it in production, it affects many, many things. And everything from how clean your data is to how well your people are trained, and what do you do if the AI starts making mistakes. These need to be embedded in the organization. No? And then I think a vastly underrated problem is when you start automating decisions involving people. Kunyari, are you going to automate the hiring process? No? You have an AI scan through CVs and then tell you who you should hire or not, all the way to customers. No, using facial recognition, can you predict what customers will need? A lot of that can lead to a lot of unfair decision making if your data is not robust. And that's where I think a lot of the, I would say, discussions around AI ethics comes in. No? And then later we can talk about that in the further questions. So inherently, if you want to manage AI governance, you also have to manage data governance. And I think that's even harder to implement. Because right now it's pretty much stuck in the IT department, but data governance should be the business of everyone in the company. So that means getting people from marketing, from operations, from HR to look at data. And I'll tell you from personal experience, most of the time they don't want to look at the data. They leave that to the IT people. So I'll end it there. But I think those are the broad strokes. No, if we want to start incorporating AI in private sector, in corporates, it's a big cultural change. The data, the algorithms have been there for a while, but the organizations need to change.
Thank you so much for that, Sir Ligot. How about from the government's perspective naman? Let's hear from Sir Raymond.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this brown bag discussion. So I'm really honored to be part of this panel along with our esteemed panelists, Professor Naval and Sir Ligot. So I think I'm the most junior among the panelists. So I bow to the wisdom of my seniors now. And it's true, they already mentioned some of the key points that surround the adoption and incorporation of AI in governance. So like Professor Naval gave us sort of the overview, how it is in the Philippines, and Sir Ligot provided us an overview of how things are in the private sector. But on the side of the government, I'd like to begin my discussion by highlighting that AI is all about logic. No, if then that's the foundational logic of AI, and you take that to the extreme when you apply more advanced AI, and you try to apply that to government, which is government is all about really politics and all about managing all of these different shades of gray in making decisions that will impact lives of so many people. So a big example is about the COVID-19 pandemic. You can develop a simple AI to determine for example, what the alert level to place a certain region under, and it would be impossible to create an AI that will come up with decisions that will be that will be acceptable to everyone, because there's always exceptions. There's always things that you should consider, and that's something that I think will have to, AI governance will have to take into consideration. So Sir Ligot earlier mentioned, what if the AI makes mistakes, or what if the data leads the AI to make so-and-so decision that is beneficial to, for example, a certain group, but is discriminatory or harmful to another group. So there are so many considerations that you'll have to weigh. So I think from the point of view of the government, we can begin by trying to explore how AI can be utilized to manage simple government processes. For example, automating the analysis of data so that data can be useful to our decision makers when they come up with policies, or maybe come up with data that can be useful for policy making on, for example, the management of flows. For example, in urban areas, there are so many things to consider, but if there is a way to simplify and summarize all of this, massive amounts of data that we have access to, then that can probably enhance governance. But of course, we still need people to make the decisions. No, governance cannot be separated from politics, and that's something that I think AI can never handle in politics. That's my perception. So I think we can also hear from our other panelists, especially about what the best case scenario is for AI in the Philippines, what the key opportunities and constraints are that we'll be facing. So I think that's going to be an interesting discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, Sir Raymond. Um, Actually, that's already transitioning to our next question. That's a very good um transition already when Sir Raymond mentioned about the possibilities. So now let's move to how do we envision AI in the next years? Oh, specifically perhaps in 2050. So how do you see AI in governance um in the worst and the best case scenarios? So maybe we can start again with Professor Naval.
Okay. There are several views regarding that. So the doomsday scenario where we'll be slaves to AI. So you say that's going to happen eventually. Now, how soon would that happen? We don't know. Some say it's going to be before 20, around 2050. That's 30 years from now. And that's really possible, no? And to what extent? But it really depends again on the progress of AI. No? But looking at history, so AI is basically started in the 50s. Um, and when it started, it was purely an intellectual curiosity. But we have observed how it progressed. So over the decades, so in the 60s, there was a lot of hype regarding AI, and there were obviously heightened expectations regarding AI technology. And there were many things that we thought were easy, but were in fact very difficult. So the AI of the 70s were mainly about logic. No? So this logical reasoning, the use of logical engines. And at that time, the Japanese government embarked on a project which sort of like threatened the leadership of the United States. No? They were producing logic engines, and they were getting the top young researchers from all over the world to work on these engines. But it really didn't work. Why? Because AI, obviously AI requires logic, but it's not just logic. So for example, say when we're looking at things, we are perceiving things, it does not require logic. So we just intuitively identify object, for example. And then also emotions, which by the way is part of intelligence in my view, is not captured by these logical laws. You have the modus ponens, and this laws of logic. So the idea then was to formulate logic, or to formulate artificial intelligence, or better still, to equate intelligence with logic, following the laws of logic. No? So you have like mathematical uh, logical reasoning. That was the uh, AI of the 70s. But then we can only go so far, because as we know, AI is and will involve logic, but it is not just logic. Right now, the advances in AI actually due to what's called deep learning. And this deep learning at the moment does not capture logic yet. No, it's going to be powerful if you combine logic with deep learning. So even more powerful than what we have now. But even with this deep learning that we see we're using right now, the development is just so mind-boggling. And for us in doing research, it's very, very difficult because there are 30,000, close to 40,000 papers every year, new papers being published. And just to figure out which ones are important is already a big problem. And okay, and there's so much material there that's not yet digested. And these are very important research papers. Then we have applications. So we are just basically starting the AI revolution. So we've actually transitioned already, from the age of the internet, IA, internet age, okay, IA, and now we have AI, baliktad, age of artificial intelligence, no. So it's from the internet age to AI, age of artificial intelligence. So we have already transitioned into that. So perhaps not so much in this country, but you read in newspapers, in magazines, in the US, and in many in advanced countries, it's a daily thing. They talk about developments in AI in whatever field, medicine, industry, of course, etc., etc. So now it's really very hard to make predictions, as to what will happen within the next 30 years. So looking back, it's like, how was AI in the in the 1990s? Well, I was alive already by then. So unlike many of you who are still, who are not yet here, you're very young, and that's great. No? I saw the development of AI from the 90s up to the present day. So it's hard because there are what we call AI winters. So these are periods when people get just fed up, or not fed up, but disillusioned with the with the heightened expectations of artificial intelligence. So as for me, I'm not brave enough to make bold predictions as to what's going to happen, but probably just maybe parrot or echo some concerns that some thinkers have actually been saying. So Elon Musk, for example, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, they're not really very pessimistic about the future of artificial intelligence, in the sense that this technology will actually be helping us. So it's more of like they will take over. And it's actually worrying because the pace of development is so fast that it's really possible that what they've been saying might turn out to be correct. So we'll probably be slaves to AI, maybe. It's hard to say. It's hard to tell.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Naval. Now let's hear from Sir Lidot on your vision.
Sige. Well, ano naman tayo, fortune tellers, no? So this could be completely wrong. But I think, well, first, from if I'm working in a company, you really have to break down any technology, including AI, into things that businesses can use, and then there you determine whether the outcome will be good or bad. So at its very base, I would say level, from a business process, maybe the most popular three things you can expect from any AI project. It's either a classification process or a forecasting process or a simulation process. Maybe just keep it there. No, there are more. Pero for a business, these three things are also done in business, but they usually are done through the help of experts or through the help of manual calculation. The AI has the opportunity of making that faster. And then you go to, I would say there are many AI domains, but I think the most popular, I would say most mature, maybe ano lang yan, tatlo lang yan. Either it's the text and language processing domain, the computer vision domain, which includes facial recognition and object detection, and this thing called expert systems, where instead of a human being making a decision or planning, you have an AI algorithm. Like one of the earliest examples that I can think of, because I came, for example, from the financial sector. The top two I would say proto AI processes we were involved in. Let's say in capital markets, we used algorithms to trade. What do you buy? What do you sell? Depending on whatever algorithm. And then in commercial banking, you have applications like credit scoring. Who do you approve or who do you decline for a loan? Although the early versions of these were purely just statistical, no? And the data that was used is internal data by a bank or data submitted by a customer in an application form. Nowadays, you have the benefit of big data, where you can get data from social media, you can get data from satellites, you can get data from unstructured text. Pero it's still the same process. Are you classifying? Are you forecasting? Are you simulating? So if we go to the projection, 2050 is about 30 years from now. No? And 30 years ago, where we were in the 90s. So maybe you can get analogs from other types of technology. Like for example, let's just use banking because it's something everyone can relate to. 30 years ago, everyone would line up to a branch, or at best you go to an ATM machine, and those things still exist. But then nowadays you have the benefit of internet banking, mobile banking, and then before you know it, you'll have intelligent assistants, no? Who will be managing your portfolio for you. So yun yung natural progression from something very analog, very manual to something more automated. But then you can then take parang two paths, no, with that kind of logic. So maybe let's just think about three things. No? What's the best case and worst case for data? What's the best case and worst case for how data and AI are used? And I think one of the biggest, I would say, parameters for the future will be how many people actually understand it. So the skills availability. So syempre, the best case scenario is we have a lot of data, it's clean, it's available, it's open. Nowadays it's partly open and not really clean. So in the future, the hope is data availability for models will be better. You also have skills availability. 30 years ago, kukunti lang may alam ng AI, no? And the references and the books and the technologies are very expensive to find. Usually you go abroad for that, or you get seen Prof Naval, who is one out of just a few people. Now more and more people are understanding it. So maybe in 30 years it's common knowledge. That's the best case scenario. And then the use case, I would say the best case is before 30 years ago, no one even thought about data automation. Now you have partly some applications. In the future, everything is automated. You can talk to your bank account. You can talk to your car. You don't even need to drive your car. Yan yung mga rosy scenarios. And of course, the worst case, you just reverse all of that. Data is bad. It continues to be closed. Like, on a side note, everyone's worried about COVID, no? But medyo magwa 1 week na, hindi pa available yung data ng DOH. Mga ganyan bagay. I'm sure it's not intentional, but that's bad. No? AI becomes monopolistic. That's a danger. Kasi nga companies can also create monopolies out of AI. And the usual suspects are Microsoft, Google, Facebook, because they're the ones at the forefront also with the R&D. Baka ang mangyari, we all become too dependent on them. Like for example, in cloud computing, we're now dependent on Amazon, Microsoft, and Google Cloud. Paano na yung open cloud? Dati may ganun, ngayon parang nawala. And then I think from a use case perspective, in the same way AI can be beneficial, it can be harmful. Hindi yung harmful, accidentally harmful, like we were talking about kanina, like discrimination. I think you can weaponize the AI. You can create autonomous weapons where you have drones that can kill someone from remote using facial recognition. How do you stop that? Or we're already seeing digital weaponization of AI, through disinformation. Deep fakes are creating fake video, and that can be the source of identity theft and propaganda. Although the underlying technology of deepfake is computer vision, so it's a scientific marvel yung ginawa nila. You can clone si Obama and he'll look exactly and sound exactly like Obama. So scientific breakthrough. Pero how is it being used? If it's going to be used to mislead people and manipulate elections, that's bad. So I think that's where we're standing now. We're at that crossroads. The technology has gotten good enough and accessible enough, but it can also be used for bad things.
Thank you so much for those visions, Sir Ligot. I think those are things that we should really talk about right now, especially if we are to really embrace AI in governance. Um, for the government perspective naman po, let's hear from Sir Raymond.
Thank you, Karen. So, yeah, very interesting points raised by Professor Naval and Sir Ligot. So, Professor Navala was referring to earlier, that we'll probably become slaves to technology in the future. And I'd argue that we are already slaves to technology because, you get a notification on your smartphone, you have no choice but to look, who is it? Or your alarm clock rings, you have to wake up because you set the alarm. And, it's something that we do on a daily basis. But when we talk about the best and worst case scenarios, what are we really trying to envision? For example, when you talk about worst case scenarios for AI, it's something like having some type of Ultron personality that will determine that humanity is the problem, no? Or is it something like a Skynet where you have the intention to protect everyone, but it ends up again deciding that, oh, we can protect everyone from everyone. So just, how do you do that? You eliminate everyone, then there's no problem anymore. So mga ganun, no? Or how about the Matrix, where the AI determined that the best way to to ensure the survival of humanity is to keep them, in a virtual world, hooked into a virtual world. So these are some dystopian scenarios that if you take the progression of AI to the extreme. But more realistically, let's go back to what we have now. Now we have AI, for example, when you are traveling, you're driving, you use these things like Google Maps or Waze, and you give it some inputs. No, I want to go here, I want to go there, and it uses AI to find the best way for you to get from point A to point B. So is that the best that we can achieve with AI? That we use it as a tool, no? Or is the best case scenario something like Iron Man's Jarvis, that you can ask to do anything, analyze anything, and will give you the best inputs possible, the best possible course of action based on the logic that it has. So there's a very wide continuum, no, between the worst case and the best case. So I guess what we should try to aim at is itong best case, of course, but realistically, how do we get there? And more importantly, what's our intention? Do we need a tool that we will use that will make life easier for us? So for example, if you're an Apple user, you have Siri, or if you're an Android user, you have Alexa, and you can tell Siri and Alexa, Siri, hey Siri, do this, do that, or hey Alexa, do this, do that. And they are slowly becoming more and more capable, no? In the past, I remember you can't use Alexa or Siri to make a call. But recently, you can tell, hey Siri, call so and so contact, and she'll dial the phone, no, for you. You don't need
You'll
to do
need to
anything.
unlock your iPhone first.
Yeah, so yeah, narinig ako ni Siri, di ba? So, what is it with AI? What is it that we want to do with AI? Do we need a tool to enable us to do better, to do more? Do we need AI to do the heavy lifting for us? No, so these are some considerations that we can keep in mind. But from the perspective of someone in government, no, if only we had an AI that could, nabanggit na kanina ni Prof. Naval and ni Sir Ligot, no, that we had an AI that could analyze all of the government's financial transactions to determine which ones are legitimate, which ones are fraudulent. We had an AI that could automatically assess applications for a whole range of regulatory, permits, licenses that would really take out the human intervention that is at the root of opportunities for corruption. No, or if you had an AI that could analyze for example, the facts of a certain case, and the AI can say with finality, no, absolutely no human emotion, no, the perfectly impartial judge, now just based on the facts. These are the facts. These are the evidences, and based on the facts and the evidence presented, this is the verdict. No. So is it something that we can achieve? Is it something that would be possible politically? No, that's another consideration. Are we going to be able to convince our politicians to enact laws that will allow us to maximize the potentials of AI? Are we going to be able to convince them to support initiatives that will allow us to develop AI in such a way that we'll be able to achieve all of these moving forward? So, there's so many considerations, and I think it's important for us, especially in government, to start talking about it and start making considerations. No? Kasi, for example, talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, we are collecting so much data. For example, I'm sure a lot of us here have used the QC Pass, the Pasig Pass, Valtrace, all of these technologies. But there is really very limited, if any, analysis of where people have been going, how cases spread. And if we only had AI that is capable of analyzing all of these movements, all of these possible contacts, and identifying, okay, this person turned out positive, went to this place, and was there with all of these people at the same time, more or less. So the mga possible exposures, then that AI can immediately send out notifications to all of those potential contacts. Now, oh, this person was in that place same time as you, turned out to be positive, so please isolate, get tested after 5 days, mga ganon. So, ang daming applications, but are we ready, really? Are we really ready for that? Because if we have something like that, if we had something like that, for example, I receive a message na, oh, I went to this place, person I was with in that place turned out to be positive. I receive a notification. What are the implications for data privacy? What are the implications for my capability to decide for myself, whether I want to undergo quarantine, whether I want to receive treatment, receive help? Because if you have AI, all of that's going to be automated. So it takes away the human factor, the decision making, really, from the people, and gives it to the machine. So are we willing to do that? Are we ready to give up some of our human agency to the machines in favor of efficiency, in favor of justice, in favor of what? No? So we have to have some very difficult conversations about what we deem to be more important, what we deem to be more valuable. And I think that's going to have an impact on the opportunities and the constraints for AI moving forward.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Sir Raymond. Indeed, there are a lot of factors that we should consider in the use of AI, especially in governance. Um, since we already shared our visions, best and worst case, perhaps I'd like to also ask what will be the I think some of you already shared about the key opportunities with regards to the preferred vision or the best case scenario. What would be the key opportunities or also the key constraints in achieving this preferred vision or preferred scenario? Ano kaya yung key constraints and key opportunities? Let's start again po with Prof. Naval.
Okay, it's kind of hard to answer that question in a comprehensive way because, as we know, AI is applicable to any field of human endeavor. So wala siyang exception. No? So think of a human endeavor. You can apply AI there. I often ask my students, can you think of an endeavor, a human endeavor, where you cannot apply AI? Hirap. Actually, no one has yet given me an answer that can convince me. No? So, in other words, you can actually apply AI in everything: arts, music, painting, sports, anything. So you can apply AI there. So it's really up to the creativity of each one of us to come up with applications. You spoke of constraints, so probably that's the one that would be interesting. So as we know, we are actually competing against other countries in AI. No? So although sabi nga nila, we are delayed, we are lagging behind compared to a lot of other countries when it comes to artificial intelligence. Yes, it's true, but for a field that's gonna be with us for the next forever, it doesn't really matter if they are ahead by 5 years or 10 years because AI will be with us for centuries. So of course, it's gonna impact us who are at this time when AI is fast developing. Lugi tayo, no? However, we can easily catch up because, as we know, the Filipinos are very creative. No? So, and again, what is needed to apply AI to anything is really creativity, whether it be financial markets, arts, music, sports, public administration, governance, anything. It's human creativity, and we are known for being very creative. However, of course, we need a minimum amount of knowledge to be able to contribute. No? So, fortunately, the Philippines is actually a bit ahead compared to the other countries when it comes to that because you go outside the country, they talk about AI, but there's not a lot of countries have a course on artificial intelligence as a course, no? As a course, no? You have computer science as a course, but then AI as a course, very few. No? Even the top universities in the US, AI is still embedded within in computer science. We're fortunate that we have now a Master of Science in AI in UP. It's already available. We have rolled it out and we'll see lots of students coming in. And soon we also have the PhD in AI. So it's not PhD in computer science, majoring in AI. No, it's PhD or masters in AI. And we're one of the countries that one of the universities in the world offering this course. Now, this is very important because we will be empowering Filipinos. We need an army of AI practitioners and engineers and academics. We need hundreds of thousands, literally. And even if we have 10,000, it's not enough, no, to be able to innovate using AI technologies. So we need lots of people. So really, to answer your question, the way to move forward is really to first educate the young people like you, the students, especially those who are just going to take their college courses. It would be nice if they could already go into artificial intelligence as early as, say, even high school. And I've seen high schools, young kids play around with AI algorithms, and that's great. So we need a lot of these people. We need hundreds of thousands of them. We need lots of AI engineers to be able to innovate and contribute so that the country can be an AI hub. It's very hard to compete against China and the United States. So they're the ones competing in this field. But I think it's still possible.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Naval. Now let's hear from Sir Ligot.
Ano ulit yung tanong? Opportunities.
Yes,
Ano?
key opportunities and key constraints po.
Sige. So for opportunities, again, if you're adopting the business perspective, you have to look at what parts of your business can benefit not just from automation but from artificial intelligence automation. I think hindi naman completely new yan. There are already also maturing domains. Maybe the top 4 I can think of are any process that involves client interaction. So nabanggit ni Professor Naval yung chatbots, that's one. But it's not just chatbots. Pretty much anything can be, akala mo you're not interacting with an AI, but you are, no? Like there are websites that are already run by artificial intelligence, but instead of talking to it, to a chatbot, it analyzes what you click on the website. Or there are intelligent buildings, for example, where the lighting systems are going on and off depending on where people are, and that has a massive impact in energy, savings. I think one underrated area where AI can make an impact is planning and decision making. Kasi usually in an organization, mga tao yung gumagawa niyan. Usually very credentialed people. And I'm not saying credentials are bad, no, but I think that's also the counterintuitive thing about AI. For AI to prosper, you have to learn to let go of pretty much all your human knowledge. Not all, but your human biases. You have to learn to let data make decisions for you. In some areas, it's easier, like operations, logistics, kasi ano ba naman yung knowledge mo doon? It's a repetitive process. But I would say in higher value areas in a company like finance, marketing, or even scientific domains like health. These are not naturally populated by people who spent decades studying, being a doctor, being a scientist. It's very hard for people like that to let go of their knowledge in favor of a machine or in favor of. And that's what I was saying about the cultural change. But isipin nyo, we're already at a point in time where the volume of transaction in any particular business, any particular process, or even things in government, like we're at the level where we can't even test everyone for COVID. That's really the opportunity for AI. Na hindi na dapat dumadaan sa tao yan. It should be machine driven. That should be data driven. But yeah, your biggest enemy is bias, history. So I'll focus on constraints. I think biggest constraint is gatekeeping. There are some areas where the AI applications are fairly well known, pero hindi ka papayagan, no? There are many gatekeepers. And then on the flip side naman, there are areas where actually the data is there, no one is just brave enough to do it. Like nabanggit ni Sir Raymond kanina, you want to make procurement more efficient, you want to eliminate corruption. Well, I think as early as last year, in open source na lang PhilJeps lahat ng procurement data, going back to the year 2000, I think. It's big, it's not something that will fit on Excel. But if you're really, brave enough, if you're an AI researcher, do it as a project. Find out how many times you'll have 10,000 peso batteries being charged by the government, yung mga ganyang bagay. It's buried deep in the data set if you go there. No? Other constraints are, I would say, more recent ones, like cybersecurity is a problem. So the more you automate, the more you are now prone to interference. For example, yung mga recent hacks on our banking apps. On the flip side, you want more convenience because you can access your bank account online. But then if the apps are not designed properly, someone can come in and steal your money. So that's always the trade-off. More convenience means more security flaws. And actually, cybersecurity is an area where AI can also help because you can do predictive detection of intrusion kasi may mga patterns din yan. I want to highlight what Prof. Naval said about specialists. I'm not sure if this is actually an old article now, I put it on the chat. No? This is an article talking about Finland and their mission to train 1% of their population on the basics of AI. 1%. Doesn't sound big, but kunyari 100 million Filipinos, that means we need 1 million Filipinos to understand AI if we want to be at parity with what Finland is doing. And the reason why they did this is not because they're debating whether AI will be useful or not. They already know it's a given. It means everyone has to learn it. I'll give you a similar experience we had. Some of you might have heard of a project called Sparta, which we worked with DOST on. That's a project to train 30,000 Filipinos in data, not even AI, just data. And I can tell you how many people said it would never work. Wag nyo nang gawin yan, it's a waste of time, you don't have instructors, only certain schools can teach it, blah, 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 blah. And we just said, you know what, forget that. Just gonna go and offer it for free. And I'm happy to say right now we have 39,000 scholars. Now the question is, will they finish? So yun din yung tanong, even if you gave the education for free, the knowledge is there, it's the political will of people whether they're going to take the knowledge or not. And I think that will come later when jobs are now getting automated, when you cannot do anything manually anymore. So that will be the next parang movement. No? People will be forced to use AI. It's not dissimilar to computing in general. If you go back 50 years, not everyone had a computer. Siguro you had one computer operator. Panahon ng mga MS-DOS in a department, everyone was using yellow pad. Now everyone has a laptop. Pero now it's a complete opposite naman. Everyone has a computer, but maybe in a department, only one person knows data, analytics, and AI. So it's not hard to imagine that in the next few years, everyone will be using some form of an AI tool. And again, you can split it between people who can design the AI, so you need those specialists, and people who can just use it, pero know where to use it. Parang walang pinag-iba yan sa kotse. You don't need to know how an internal combustion engine works to drive a car. No, those are two separate skills. But if you don't know people who can diagnose the problem with your spark plug, kahit na magaling ka mag-drive, if your car breaks down, then you won't get very far. So you need these two groups of people to interact. The engineers who can build the AI, and then the users, business users who can use the AI. And these skills don't exist. No one is teaching that. No? Even if you go to business school, at best, they'll teach you forecasting and operations research, pero not AI. And the reason is, walang magtuturo. So we also need to mint more AI teachers. So how you get teachers? You only get teachers when you have people like si Professor Naval, who's willing to devote their career and interest into studying the AI itself. So it's parang domino effect. Pero it's not bleak. I think the early signs are there. So the future looks bright. But again, it boils down to political will. No? Are we really willing to make that investment? And then yun nga, we can be behind, we can be ahead. Pero let's not forget we're in a global marketplace. So while people are also recovering from COVID, countries are also investing in AI. So if we're the last country to recover from COVID and learn AI, wow, no? How's that economically in the next few years? Talagang maiwan tayo, whether we like it or not. So I think the imperative has to be there.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Sir Ligot. And last for the government perspective again, Sir Raymond.
All right. So great points from Professor Naval and Sir Ligot. I think it will be important for us to look around us. No, what do we have? What are we in agreement about? Then from there, we can probably identify the most efficient ways for us to move forward. So, for example, it will be difficult for us to agree on who or what should benefit from so and so government program. No? Anytime you discuss government resources, anytime you discuss restrictions or permissions, authorizations, it will be quite a very long discussion, no? Very long discussion talaga. But there are things that we are in agreement about. There are things that people in government and even the politicians have already expressed agreement on and have in fact supported efforts to achieve. For example, we were able to pass a a law recently, no, ease of doing business and efficient government service delivery. So even though that law, no, is still in its infancy, we're still trying to find out the best ways for us to implement the law. We're still trying to make sure that everyone in government is familiar with the law. We're still trying to ensure that the people who know about the law and even those who don't are told that they should comply with the law. So meron tayong ganitong effort, no? But despite this agreement that efficiency is important, that public service is our utmost concern, there are still limitations. And despite these limitations, no, there are points of agreement nonetheless. For example, when we try to talk about allocating resources, no, between government, local government units in NCR, for example, as compared to local government units outside NCR. You look at the local government units in NCR, they're mostly self-sufficient financially compared to local governments outside NCR. So even though we have a higher population density here in NCR, when we talk about allocating resources, X amount, to Mindanao or to Odette, the areas that were devastated by Odette, there's no opposition on the part of the officials from NCR, simply because they understand that there is a need, no, and it would be politically unacceptable for them to block or to object to such actions. And I think we can do the same for AI when we're able to find those specific governance areas, those specific processes of government, those specific domains wherein AI would be useful. No? I think we'll be able to find champions, no, who are willing to support us in terms of creating the necessary legal basis, the necessary policies, and the necessary technical know-how, no, mobilizing the necessary technical know-how to implement all of these innovations in governance. So when we try to incorporate AI into governance, we have to find all of these. We can start with the smaller things. For example, traffic management. How do these stoplights work? In Japan, the stoplights are smart. They placed sensors that allow the system to detect where there are buildups. And when the system detects a buildup, they automatically adjust the timing, no, on the stoplights. So that's nowhere to be found in the Philippines, but I'm sure we could use it in NCR. And if we could take this up, no, we could introduce this innovation to our local officials here in NCR, then that could be the beginning of something. That could be the beginning of something for us in AI. Since if we're able to prove, that can be a proof of concept that AI is going to be useful. AI can help you govern your city better, make it more efficient, make it a smart city. So that's something that most of our local officials in NCR, and I think in many urban areas outside the NCR, Cebu, Davao, and Region 3, doon sa Angeles, Clark, Subic area, Baguio, I think our local officials there will be interested in this. But at the national level, how do we encourage our officials? No, we can begin with the executive officials muna, because the executive branch has a significant leeway in implementing the law as long as we do not violate any provisions of the law. We are free to innovate. We are free to design our own processes. We are free to find the best way to implement the law, to perform our mandates. So approaching our executive leaders, mga cabinet secretaries, the undersecretaries, the heads of various government agencies, government corporations, makakatulong yung AI talaga sa kanila. And I think the main constraint, in their minds at least, kasi they're not able to process mga several levels forward. They only see the cost. They find it difficult to see how more efficiency in operations can save the agency money in the long run. So I think that's one of the constraints that we see now, yung cost, the perception that AI is very expensive because you'll have to hire all of these technical experts. You have to hire mga data analysts, people who can design as Mr. Sir Ligot mentioned. So all of these resources that you'll have to mobilize will cost the government so much, and yun yung perception nila. So it will be difficult to change that perception unless we have proof of concept. So yun, kailangan makapag-develop tayo ng proof of concept. Mga muna, we try to find the things that we can apply AI to that will not cost so much, that will not require so much time and effort, that will not require us to amend any of our laws, that will not require us to significantly change up our existing policies, but will definitely have a positive impact on the processes, efficiency, the effectiveness of government decision making. So these are some things that we can consider. Another simple constraint is resistance to change. Meron tayong mga dinosaur pa talaga sa government, let's admit it. And these dinosaurs, they prefer to do things the old way, the way they are used to, the way that is familiar to them. So we're very fortunate. There are some agencies that have leaders who are willing to accept technological progress. There are agencies that are able to keep up with the developments in so many ways. But there are some agencies that insist on having hard copies of everything, on having mga hard copies with physical signatures or thumb marks or any mga dry seal, notwithstanding the fact that there are new technologies that are even more secure than these dated technologies. So yun yung nabanggit kanina ni Prof. Naval and ni Sir Ligot that we really need to educate our people, and since it will be difficult to educate effectively yung mga dinosaurs natin, we can set our sights on the junior and middle managers, no? Yung mga medyo millennials or phillennials na nasa government who are willing to take on these new challenges, who are willing to learn new things, or those who are willing to be schooled by those who are younger than them or those who are more capable than them, no? Ito yung mga tao na dapat natin i-target. At the same time, educating our people in general, no, about technology, about how important it is to maximize technology but not abuse it, no? Kasi yun nga, meron tayong mga nakita na na mga possible uses of technology for disinformation, for sowing chaos, for commission of various crimes. So we want to educate our people to avoid that, no? So yun yung mga nakikita natin na opportunities and constraints. There are many people in government who are willing to learn and they're willing to embrace innovation. The challenge is finding them and providing them the necessary know-how, the necessary input for them to lobby it doon sa kanilang management and to be able to really promote the adoption of AI in governance. So ito kasama yan, there's a very complicated process of change management, of promoting reforms in government, and it involves so many moving parts. But if we get the technical basics down, and if we identify the people, accurately, we identify the people who can help us move this process along, then we'll be on the path to achieving the ideal scenario by 2050, in my opinion.
Yes, thank you so much for all those insights on key opportunities and key constraints, Professor Naval, Sir Ligot, and Sir Raymond. Now, for our last question for this discussion, it will mainly focus on the key roles of each sector. No? Ano po kaya yung pwedeng gawin ng academe, ng private sector, at ng public sector in order to achieve yung preferred natin na scenario in the future. So, I think roughly nadaanan na po ng each of us, but if you would like to add on the roles of each sector, maybe we can start again po with Professor Naval, Sir Ligot, and then Sir Raymond.
Okay, so regarding the roles of the different sectors, academic, private, and public. So, well, since I'm from the Academe, I'll have to say my part here. Really, the role of the Academe is to work on, of course, educating, educating people so that they receive more formal education in artificial intelligence. However, let me say that really you don't need to take these courses. If you are just inquisitorial, and if you have the right background, you can already go very far, even if your background is super far away from say engineering. I've known people with backgrounds like philosophy or music double into AI, and they're doing quite well. So right now, AI is being democratized. What do I mean by this? Democratization of AI basically means making available the algorithms that are already being developed. So Google, Facebook, and many other companies and even researchers are sharing away their codes. So why is that? No? So after spending so much time developing code, you'd like to share away your code. Why is that? So will I lose something by sharing away my code? Well, not really, because code, the program is just one part of the whole thing. The other part is, as mentioned by Dominic and Raymond, is data. So data and code. Code is useless without data, especially these days. No? So the ones, however, the problem here is that the ones who have a lot of data will be able to make use of this data using code, the same code, to generate innovation. In other words, the codes are all available to everyone. The one now who will make best use of this code is the one with big data. That's why big data is big deal. Right now, we have a little debate in our lab because some people say that, sir, you're pressing us to develop new algorithms, but these algorithms, after 6 months, they're useless. They will be superseded by better algorithms. And that's true. You may have the best state-of-the-art algorithm now, but in 6 months or so, that is going to be replaced by something else. However, if you have a problem that you're trying to solve using data that you have, that is your advantage. That is your advantage. So data now is your advantage. It's not so much the code anymore, because you can easily learn how to make use of this data using the codes that are available. So nowadays it's no longer the code, but it's the data that matters. And it's the code is so accessible to everyone. AI is now being democratized. Now what is the role of the Academe? Well, our role is actually decreasing because we're, in a sense, becoming less relevant, since there are lots of people who can actually do AI without necessarily going to school. And I've seen people who are really very good in AI without any formal training in artificial intelligence. They come from all sorts of backgrounds. Of course, there are courses that are, if you take these courses, you're better prepared, but it doesn't mean that if you come from a course that's so far away from AI, you cannot do AI. That is not correct. That is no longer true these days. So now, what is our role then? Our role, I guess, would be to conduct R&D, our research and development, because companies, as we know, are profit-driven. They always think, if I do this R&D, how would my, what is the rate of return? And that is something that's natural. That's something that's obvious. No? So you're not going to spend anything, if you're a company, that will not give you profit either in long term or short term, and that's perfectly okay. Now, the role, therefore, of the academe and government is for government to fund those researches that are not really, that are a bit expensive and are, we might say, under the radar of industry. So as you know, industry is really very much focused on applications, and that's very good, and making profit. And those aspects of research and development, R&D, that may not necessarily have short-term rewards, so to speak, should be undertaken. This R&D project should be undertaken by the academy.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Professor Naval. We're also pretty much curious. Is there anything that we can do say for example this semester or next semester with regards to this movement on incorporating AI in governance, or that's kind of a long-term action really?
Okay, so my view is that government is very much dependent on the uh, right now on the elections. No? So who's gonna win the elections? And it's like it's obvious to perhaps some of these public officials that this AI system needs to be deployed. However, they're a bit worried because if I approve this project, the next the one who will replace me if I lose the election might just disregard this project, that kind of thing, no, and it's unfortunate, no. So, however, we have to think long term and put all this in policy, So, I guess this is probably the focus of you guys. No, you're interested more in policies, no, so that even if the political personalities change, it's written in there, no, it's in the law. So um, so I guess that would be the right approach, to put things in paper, put the things in the law, formulate policies that support artificial intelligence initiatives, both in industry and academe, and the applications of these technologies in the respective LGUs.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Professor Naval. Now let's hear from Sir Liga.
Sige. Dugtungan ko lang yung sabi ni Professor. Actually, respectfully, sir, I think the Academe probably will not fade in relevance. But I think the future looks bright if the private sector and the Academe can collaborate. For example, there was this call for funding ng DOST. I think they called it Project Cradle, where you can propose an R&D project, and AI is one of the parang priority areas. But they will only fund those with parang a commercial partner. So so parang they're trying to encourage it. It's actually harder than it sounds kasi it's hard to find companies willing to take the risk. So if we have people like Professor Naval doing the R&D, dapat ang role ng private sector is to take that risk. Kasi kailangan I mean, and I think I could be eating my words now, but I think now's the right time to take the risk because fully saturated na yung traditional business. And COVID-19 made sure na businesses are either online or efficient. Yung mga very analog-driven businesses, kusa na siyang pinapatay ng COVID. No? So you really have no choice. So if you're sort of a young company or you want to start a startup, probably this is the least risky time to do it because people will actually give you the chance. Maybe unlike 10 years ago, you probably won't get any takers. No? Pero ngayon, people are willing to listen. And then I wanna share some articles again. See, Google, they have this unit called Deepmind. No? That's one of their AI units. Sila yung gumawa ng AlphaGo, the one who beat the Go player and the chess player. And then if you look at the first article, they lost money. And okay lang, sinalo ni Google yung loss. Because according to Google, R&D should not be profitable. Kasi you're taking risks. But if you can crack the problem, it can be profitable. So the second article, 1 year later, see, Deepmind is now profitable. So I think take that lesson. Kasi I think one of the biggest, I'll speak from experience, yung mga startups, you don't want to get into a business where hindi ka sure if you're going to make money. I mean, logically, right? But if you're looking at innovation, you should not be thinking of profit beforehand. It sounds funny kasi maybe you need the luxury of being rich or not. But actually, it's really about taking calculated bets. No? Let's use the usual suspects. Elon Musk, he got into Tesla. He didn't expect to make money. and he got into SpaceX. He didn't expect to make money. He got into these businesses because of more philosophical issues. No? We want to get out of fossil fuels and we want to be multiplanetary. Pero you look at the story of SpaceX. 4 times sila nag-launch initially. 3 times the rockets blew up. And then on the 4th time, it succeeded. And that was enough for NASA to say, okay, you guys know what you're doing. Here's a $1 billion contract so you can fly satellites now. And they are now the cheapest satellite provider. You know, if you want to fly a satellite to near Earth orbit, SpaceX is one of the cheapest. Bakit? They perfected the reusable rocket system. And imagine mo, how do you do reusable rockets? You need AI to land the rocket back on Earth. Hindi po pwedeng tao yung magdadrive niyan. Palaging sasabog yan. So that's what I mean about if they didn't take that risk initially, okay, let's calibrate an algorithm so that we can fly the rockets back. Edi tapos na yung reusable rocket system. Pero after doing all that risk-taking, maybe that's the most extreme case. Now they're one of the most profitable companies. And Elon Musk is, I think, the richest person in the world, or maybe second richest person in the world. So there's a room for R&D and there's a room for risk-taking. Maybe for the smaller businesses, like ako, I'm a small businessman, you can look at more, I would say, I wouldn't say small scale, that's undermining the value, but maybe projects where you find inefficiencies. Like some of the projects we've done were actually with the government or with NGOs. Simple things like binagit ko kanina, classification, forecasting, document retrieval. These sound very, very, very mundane. Pero when you apply AI, you're looking at a cost differential of 90% reduction in cost. Kasi wala nang mga mali, wala nang waste. But the key is, can you get past the door? You have to sell it. And that's where partnering with the Academe is important. Kasi if they, you come there, maybe you're good in business, pero it still helps to have scientists with you to explain the technology. But then you say, okay, if we can make it work, it's actually profitable for you. So it's really a commingling of the two. And of course, let's forget yung principle of bawal magkamali. I think that's very 1980s, 1990s, where it will end your career if you make a mistake, lalo na sa corporate. If you want to work with AI, you have to fail fast. No? Machine learning is actually the same thing. Machine learning makes many, many mistakes, and then the margin of error starts getting smaller. Ganon din yung business. Learn to fail fast, make small mistakes, and then pag natamaan nyo, you'll make it. I think the future is bright for startups willing to take that risk. Ganon talaga dapat ang natin, ang principles natin.
Thank you so much for that, Sir Dominic. Fail fast. Ayan. So, last naman po from the public sector, Sir Raymond.
Yeah. Right. Again, very important points already mentioned by Professor Naval and Sir Ligot. So I'll just add a little more and try to focus on what the government can do, since it was already mentioned by our experts here that the role of government will really be to provide the policy basis, legal framework, and as well as provide the fiscal support in terms of providing research grants or providing manpower, allocating resources to organize teams of experts to tackle all of these AI-related projects. And I think one of the more important points that the government needs to address is building up or setting safeguards for how AI can be used. And although that might be difficult now in the meantime, since we're very new to this, we're still trying to determine how and when and where AI can be used. I think it will be beneficial for the government to start taking these steps to ensure that the use of AI will not lead to self-harm on our part. So, unahin siguro natin yung policy and legal framework. These are two related but different concepts. So when you talk about the legal framework, you really need to have the law that will allow you or not prohibit you from using AI for various governance processes. So, for example, right now, we can argue that our legal framework is conducive to the development and adoption and incorporation of AI into various governance processes, since there is nothing that prohibits the use of AI. But our policy, no, if you look at the other related laws and policies, for example, you look at the auditing policies of the government, then you will realize that, okay, wala nga tayong prohibitions against AI, but you require that dapat hard copy lahat. Dapat ito yung process na susundin, and this process is set in stone. You have to follow this. If you do not follow this process, you will be flagged by the auditing agency, or you will be flagged by the Civil Service Commission or the Ombudsman or whoever is the oversight agency. So even though we don't have prohibitions, we have very rigid processes, very rigid guidelines that need to be updated so that the use of AI will be more possible. So I think that's what we need to focus on. We need to review our regulatory framework, our legal framework, our policies. There's so many policies and laws, and some of these laws contradict each other. So we also need to see how AI will fit into our current legal and policy environment, and what changes we need to make so that we can maximize AI. So dun tayo pwedeng mag-focus, and that's something that I think you can do if you're looking for something that you can do within the next semester. You can do some sort of review or research that focuses on the government's regulatory environment, the government's legal frameworks and all that. So you can try to find these stumbling blocks, so to speak, and recommend ways to address all of these stumbling blocks. Another thing that the government can do is allocate resources to support yung R&D, to support efforts to develop AI, to incorporate AI, to update processes, to update regulations. So yun, hindi lang for the technology itself, but also the support that will allow whatever technology we develop to be useful. So are there any restrictions that need to be addressed? Are there any limitations that need to be addressed or removed? Or is there something that the government should allocate more resources to? For example, yung computing capabilities of our government offices, is it something that government should invest more in? Yan yung mga natin. Kasi for example, in our agency, the ILG, we have a very limited budget for procuring ICT resources. And that budget is lodged with the central office. So the 17 regional offices, the 81 provincial offices, and the several thousand field offices have no say in what ICT resources the central office will procure. So is it something that can be changed? No, definitely. But how do you change that? How do you convince people who have been used to this system of centralizing to decentralize? So yeah, that's another challenge that maybe you can look into. So government can and will be able to do so much, but will need assistance, will need support. And I think one of the things that the students can do is really to organize these kinds of activities. Itong mga ganitong discussions, ganitong fora, and you can invite more people. You can invite people from maybe the agencies that are in charge of setting policies, in charge of developing regulations. So yun yung mga some steps that you can take. But on our part, the government, yun yung yun yung pwede naming maging focus. That will be our main role, really setting the legal policy framework, ensuring that there are that all the hindrances are minimized and only the safeguards are left, just to ensure that we won't be going towards self-harm by using AI, and of course providing the necessary support to the academe and to the private sector. So, yun, my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Sir Raymond. I think this has been a very interesting and very insightful discussion from the academic sector, from the private sector, and of course from the public sector. Before I think we close the discussion part, I'd like to ask our audience or our advisor, Sir Elmer, if you want to ask something or add something. It's now open for comments as well. Personally, I think sobrang daming insights that we got from this discussion, and we hope that the conversation with regards to AI and governance will go on, like hindi siya mag-stop in this discussion, especially that we already mentioned about the key opportunities, about the key constraints. Ayan. So, I think wala nang questions from our audience. So, maybe ask our advisor for some comments, Sir Elmer.
I have a quick question. No? So this is the City Futures Lab. It's hosted in partnership with UP and CPAG. And the idea for the lab is, yung lahat ng mga suggestions, pwede niyong iba to sa lab, and we just might be able to find students to take that project forward or initiative forward. No? From the tone of this conversation, we have si Raymond's from DILG NCR. No? DILG NCR, 15 million kagad yung population na makikinabang dyan. No? If Raymond just reports this to his regional director. No? And then one from the Academe, and then si Pros from Academe, and then si Doc from Parang we attempted to bring together representatives. Do you have any suggestions on something we can do jointly, no? In the next 1 to 2 months, no? From Cyrolytics and from Computer Science, and then DILG, NCR, and NCPAG, na baka pwedeng mapa-assign sa estudyante para lang it can serve as the seed or catalyst of something that needs to be done that nobody else is doing so far. Parang, would you like to set up a meeting with DILG NCR, yung boss ni Raymond, and then we have this conversation, and it's a gateway to the 14 mayors. Because of the elections, the cities are in a state of flux, and in a way, they're more open to ideas. So yeah, do you have any thoughts? See, Doc.
Sige, I'll react first. So yeah, certainly. Actually, si Doc Elmer, we've been collaborating for years na. So, well, I wear several hats. As Cyrolytics, we're definitely plugged into both government and private sector. So if you need, I think that's the quickest route. No? If you have a project you want to collaborate on, tara, patulan na natin. And even if walang funding yan, I mean, like I said earlier, R&D does not need to be profit driven. In fact, it's better if it isn't. And then later, if it's proven, then you let the corporates figure out how the business model. I also teach, so if you want to collaborate with the University of Asia and the Pacific, I'm a faculty there. I can bring you in touch with the faculty on the business analytics side naman, not necessarily AI, more of, although they're very close to each other. And then, of course, the Analytics Association of the Philippines welcomes all collaboration. And in fact, we're for 2022, pangunahan ko lang ng konti, we're making AI and data ethics a big topic kasi nga these are the largely unexplored domains, no? Although the audience of AAP is primarily private sector, but if you want to bring government into it, we're certainly, we recently conducted a labor market intelligence report, which we are due to release in the next quarter on analytics. And actually, one early insight there is, parang everyone talks about data scientist, data analyst, data engineer. These are like the typical jobs. But people forget you need teachers. So there's actually a data science or AI instructor that's actually a viable job. Maybe people don't realize, because of the high demand for skills, people are actually willing to hire you as an instructor if you actually know what you're doing, and then you can help the likes of Professor Naval to expand it. Masyado lang talagang kukonti yung supply, and many of them find work abroad, so there's a brain drain. Siyempre, we won't stop our countrymen from finding jobs abroad. Pero sana bumalik din yung iba. Actually, DOST has this Balik Scientist program. I think unti-unting bumabalik na yung iba, yung mga medyo nakapag-career na abroad. But I think it's better if we retain people here without needing to put a bond or a contract for them to not go. And I think the driver there is, will there be people willing to employ them in the private and the public sector? Kasi I think most people would rather stay. And if the salaries, the salaries are artificially high, I think, for some roles. Kasi konti yung supply and demand, right? Pero kung dumami yung supply, I think salaries will be more reasonable, but you'll have more employment kasi more people will be willing to afford it. I think that's the best place. Syempre, yung mga nauna na sa field, let them enjoy their first mover advantage. But I'm talking here to lalo na yung mga Gen Z, who are in their early 20s and teenage years, consider artificial intelligence and data as a career. Talagang ito na yung future. So if those are topics you want to progress, Doc Elmer, I'm more than happy to help.
Okay, thanks. Kay Pros naman, parang a question that's more specific and perhaps more doable is and I teach at NCPAG, no? Is there a need or an opportunity or need for, say, the Dean of Comp Sci to talk with the Dean of NCPAG so that Dean to Dean may mapag-usapan na, and we can respond to this intersecting space of governance and AI?
I think the right person to talk to would be the head of the newly constituted PhD and masters in AI. So we're actually just being organized. So hindi pa siya widely known, So halos kami-kami lang muna, So we have actually constituted this. Medyo busy pa kami, but then I guess once we have started the program, we can actually engage other colleges. Kasi ngayon sobrang, kasi we're working on the PhD AI sa ngayon, so everyone is fully occupied with that, So but eventually siguro after a few months pwede na, so you can talk to us. In fact, some people in from other countries are already talking to us, Siyempre, unahan muna natin yung madali, Kasi within UP mas madali yung makipag-negotiate and interact and come out with something concrete. Compared to, say, somebody from New Zealand na malayo, so matagal pa yung ganung klaseng conversation. For that to take become fruitful, So dito muna sa atin, but give us a bit of time. I think pwede naman yon, because if we have this local talent, we should harvest that, So as mentioned nga kanina ni Dominic, baka maubos yung iba, So they might migrate or might go to other countries, because these skills, AI knowledge and skills are well sought after, in all countries. So there are a lot of AI engineers and practitioners that are needed in all countries, hindi lang dito. So So yun yung worry namin na baka we might be training people and then eventually they migrate, they move to other countries, sayang naman. But then I think the solution to that would be to create an environment such that we are actually competitive. No? So you don't need to go abroad to get high quality AI education and good salary. And you can do a lot already in the Philippines. So I think meron naman tayo, the elements are there for AI practitioners and engineers and data scientists as well to stay in the country and instead of going abroad. So yeah, so we are definitely open to collaborations with NCPAG, with the Future Cities Lab, and with industry in general. So actually, yun naman talaga ang role namin eh. So all the students will come from your colleges, and please let them apply. Meron na kaming masters muna, no? That's gonna open first semester of next school year. That's already approved by the university. Yung susunod na is the PhD AI, inaayos pa namin. Malapit na yun. Hopefully, kasabay din ng masters in AI. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So last question for Raymond. Raymond, palagay mo ba may relevance if say si RD of DILG NCR convened or organized say NCR AI for Local Governance Working Group, no, para lang ma-accelerate itong usapin AI application in our cities, no? Quezon City, Caloocan, Makati. Parang may relevance ba yon from the governance standpoint and DILG?
Yes, Doc, definitely. I think that will be an exciting activity and something that our chief executives would be interested in. Kasi yung track po talaga na nakikita namin ngayon, no, is that yung mga NCR cities natin, mga mayors natin, especially the younger ones, they want their cities to become smart cities. And as in, nasa agenda talaga nila yon. And some even have it in their mga development plans nila as a vision, no? Part of their vision na maging smart city sila. So initially we can do that, we can convene. Yun lang, we need to identify who exactly we want to convene. Do we want to convene yung mayors, yung city administrators, or do we want to convene people who might be interested in AI, mga taong meron talaga silang trabaho or meron silang functions that could be enhanced by AI. So yun, we can go generalist or we can be more focused on specific themes or governance areas. Yun lang, Doc, yung kailangan nating ma-clarify. Tapos yun, we can organize accordingly.
Okay, sige. Thanks. So yun naman yung future yung function nitong City Futures Lab and these brown bag discussions to sort of piece together the different pieces of the puzzle, no, see what's emerging, ano yung patterns, and then subukan na to cultivate the ecosystem towards the future that we prefer, no. So with that, thank you very much. This was really very rich, and thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon on this. Nag-extend tayo, but it looked like it was well worth our while, and I think many will benefit from this YouTube video as we move this agenda forward. Thank you. Back to you, Karen.
Doc Elmer, pwede makisingit
Sure.
kay Sir Raymond din. I don't know, I just haven't did my homework, but malaking bagay kasi sa government is to define jobs that are AI-centric. Right now kasi, kung titingnan mo yung plantilla, ano bang salary grade yan? No? And right now, karamihan ng mga jobs na yan are equivalent to a research assistant, which in the grand scheme of things is not very attractive for people who want to create a career. Since government is the biggest employer pa rin sa Pilipinas, I don't know which department will be brave enough, but if you can define an AI practitioner na trabaho, maybe junior, mid, and senior, and with a really good salary grade, people will naturally migrate. Yun yung sinasabi ko na we need to be proactive about creating demand for the talent. Otherwise, as Prof. Naval said, they will just migrate kasi doon defined na yung trabaho. Sa private sector, mangyayari yan na, quite naturally as industries become competitive, they will hire. No? Pero malaking bagay sa government, gawa na tayo ng ganong role. Kasi right now, even the OST cannot agree amongst themselves. No? What is the level of an AI practitioner? But just as an idea, no? Someone has to take the lead and then susunod na lahat.
Yes, sir. I agree. No? Napakahalaga po talaga na mapagkasunduan ng government agencies kung ano ba talaga, what's the value of the AI practitioner to the overall delivery of public services, performance of mandates. So dun po siguro yung medyo challenge, no? There might be some difficulty on the part of the OST and the other government agencies maybe in determining the specific functions. Kasi kung titignan niyo po yung, there's a very comprehensive list of government job titles that's regularly updated by the CSC and the DBM. And meron ho doong mga data machine operator, merong scientist, merong data analyst. There are already mga job titles na ganun, no? Tapos may leveling po yan na data analyst 1, 2, 3, 4 up to kung anong number, and with the corresponding salary grades. But yun po, no, I think we'll need to level up yung ating the value that we place in general on our scientists. Since sa ngayon, yung mga scientists natin, I understand, no, the way I see it, they are valued the same level, at par with yung mga specialists. So kung makita niyo yung mga specialists natin, their salary grades begin at around the salary grade 16, and then they go up salary grade 16, 19, 23, parang ganon. And then, ang problem din kasi sa atin, sa government, yung salary grade structure natin is quite rigid. So, yung salary grade 24, for example, division chief na yon. So, you have to be handling a team of people, you have to be handling so-and-so. So, meron na siyang implications doon sa structures, organizational structure. You can't have too many people with salary grade 24. Same goes for the higher salary grades, all the way to salary grade 30 for the undersecretaries and the commissioners for our commissions. So I think kung gusto po natin gawin yon, we will need to create a specific government agency or create a parang ano siya, a special body, commission maybe, na hindi siya nakatali doon sa salary standardization law, similar to yung Bangko Sentral or yung Development Bank of the Philippines or other government financial institutions. No, they don't have salary grades, they have a job grade or pay grade or salary level, ganon, which is not tied to our salary standardization law. And if we can get Congress to agree, no, then that can be the start of not only the creation of a more competitive industry for AI in the Philippines, but also for the other specialist industries na makita talaga ng mga practitioners na there are opportunities in the Philippines na in the government specifically. So yun po, medyo mahirap po talaga. We are limited by the salary standardization law dito sa executive branch. But if we can create a new agency, or if we can create an incentive program, that's another way around it, no? Kahit na basic, halimbawa basic yung salaries nila, it's based on the salary standardization law. But if you can make it similar to how the DFA does it, kasi in DFA they have, if you look at the allowances that are given to foreign service officers naman, they're exorbitant really. So if we can develop a similar compensation program for our scientists, then I think we can do that. No, yung compensation, yung additional compensation for foreign service officers is denominated in US dollars. So yun, baka pwedeng we we can come up with a similar compensation package for our scientists. Now, that's an easier way to go about it than creating a totally new government agency. So, yan pa.
Maybe just to immediately react, and I appreciate yung points. In some companies, private sector, the salary of a data scientist, same level as a vice president. Just to give you an idea. It's artificial, really artificial, kasi konti yung tao. Eventually, it will taper off. But yun nga, if a company wants to get ahead, they'll pay for it. Maybe in the long run, it also, to give another analog, in software development, problema ng mga programmer to, na if I'm just a programmer, I can only get to this level. If I want to become, take a higher salary, I need to become a manager, which they hate to do. If you love to code, you love to code, but you don't want to be a manager. And it's not limited to public sector. Private sector suffers from this. We need to value specialists and people who build about as much as you value bureaucrats, bureaucrats and technocrats. Eh ngayon, ang mga top levels mo are mostly bureaucratic. Bibihira yung technocrat na aangat unless you work in Academe, where you're all technocrats. So I think yan yung change in thinking na we need to make AI talaga a part of our society. We need to value knowledge workers equally, no? Kasi they're the source of R&D. And yeah, baka nga yung sinuggest mo, Sir Raymond, yung mga life hacks rather than creating a new agency. No? Pero there's also such a thing as maybe a temporary agency. No? Parang, is there such a thing as a DICT equivalent but for AI specifically? I mean, that it's just a question of priorities. Kasi if you go back to where things are, it's not filtering as quickly as it should. Kasi nga, daming dadaaning red tape. No? But if you say, AI is important for the Philippines, at saka, last thing, in some companies who justify it, the HR cost, staffing cost, is one line item. Pero kung ang nababawi mo naman because of AI is the efficiency in operation, in MOOE, and everything else, no? Umakyat nga yung yung staffing cost mo, bumagsak naman yung iba, or at parity ka, you're more productive. You look at the total cost of owning AI rather than just the artificial cost of paying a few people above average salaries. Again, it's just a question of policy, I think. Just to give you an idea, and yun yung mga debate siguro na kailangan mangyari.
May I add something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Sir Elmer. I think it's important nga na katulad ng nabanggit ni Raymond, na bigyan ng i-highlight itong artificial intelligence sa government, because it's actually a catalyst for change, technological change especially, but even siguro social and economic, lahat maapektuhan ng AI. In other countries, meron ng sa United Arab Republic, UAE, meron tinatawag na Minister of Artificial Intelligence, no? So minister siya, no? So siya yung parang siguro equivalent dito sa cabinet minister, no? So ito 'yon. So it was in 2017 that UAE established the post of Minister of State for AI, no? So ganun ka-importante itong AI, no? So these guys, they have a lot of money, and they're putting a lot of money into this technology. So sana kayo as people who are directly being consulted by politicians, by government, kung i-communicate ninyo sa kanila, no, itong importance ng AI, no? So like as what I've said, no, sa UAE meron tinatawag ng Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, no? So ganun siya ka-importante, no? So parang ewan ko kung magiging equivalent yan dito, pero siguro naman pansinin naman so that hindi tayo hindi tayo mahuhuli compared to other countries.
Opo, sir. Off the top of my mind, sir, baka yung equivalent niya dito is probably a presidential advisor, parang ganun, with the secretary rank.
That's right.
Kasi parang wala namang Ministry of AI yung
Right.
UAE, but there's a very high-ranking official who has a say in development of policy of how government works in the UAE that gives them the perspective of an AI specialist. So yun po, baka that's something that we can explore. Pero yun, depende po yun sa susunod na pangulo natin. But from our level po siguro, no, all the best we can do, I think, is engage in continuous advocacy activities, lahat po ng mga forum natin na pwede nating as if we can put AI in front of our decision makers as often as possible and show them really how valuable it is and how much it can save them in terms of operational cost, efficiency, and time. No? Kasi yun yung number one na talaga, hindi po totoo na hirap tayong mag-source ng pondo. Talaga, the time is really ang dami yung government agency na hirap mag-ubos ng budget. So time is really the constraint. Yung technical capacity ng government and yung tinatawag po nila in the government financial group na absorptive capacity of the government agencies. Yun po yung natin. So mga LGUs po natin this year, they received a much larger share of the national income, yung kanilang internal revenue allotment. And the general consensus is that yung mga LGs po natin ay hindi sapat yung kanilang capacity to utilize that fund. So yun po, but definitely if they had a way to automate, if they had a way to decide faster, so to speak, definitely magagamit po nila yan. And AI can play a role in that.
Okay, thank you. Thinking in terms of the politics, so si Raymond nga is with DILG NCR. So I think we can start in NCR and then because the NCR is the capital, then yung discourse natin, the breakthroughs we have with DILG NCR, mas madaling i-kick up yan towards DILG National. So we'll be reaching out to you over the next couple of weeks to take this conversation forward. Kailangan natin tong tiyagain, but mukhang malaki yung bunga nito kung if this works well. Yan. Back to you, Karen.
Yes, that was a very interesting sharing of ideas on how we can collaborate with respect to AI and governance. And we look forward po kung ano yung maging future steps po natin. Yes, Sir Raymond, you were raising your hand po.
Meron lang akong i-take up pala, no? Maybe this would be of interest to the group. I'm also part of the data management team for COVID-19 in general, no? But right now our focus is on vaccination. And our big problem really is the quality of vaccination data. So, I think AI will be very useful in addressing itong challenges natin sa data quality for itong vaccination. So maybe that's one of the initial steps that we can take. I can introduce you to the people directly, deciding how to move forward with this. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Sir Raymond. Okay, so I think this has been a very productive and very insightful discussion. Narinig natin yung from the academic field, through Professor Naval, yung from the private sector through Sir Dominic Ligot, and from the government sector naman from Sir Raymond, and of course with the guidance of Sir Elmer, we were able to also parang make vision on how we are gonna move forward, yung mga actionable steps that we are gonna do. And I think that makes this discussion fruitful and insightful and very productive. So again, we would like to thank our guest panelists, our advisors, Sir Elmer, and of course our audience for staying, even if we extended for quite some time. So of course, we want to formally express our gratitude. And with that, I'd like to call on Kath to award our certificates of participation. Kath?
Hello. So as a sign of our gratitude for the participation of our dearest panelists for today's discussion, we would like to award these e-certificates to Dr. Prospero Naval Jr., Mr. Dominic Doc Ligot, and Mr. Raymond Gerard Ases. So please allow me to read the citation. The certificate is proudly presented to our panelists for imparting their valuable insights as panelists in Artificial Intelligence in Philippine Governance 2050, a brown bag discussion organized by Team AI in Governance under PA 152 Urban and Metropolitan Governance, first semester academic year 2021 to 2022, awarded on the 15th of January 2022 via Zoom Video Communications Incorporated. So once again, thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you for that, Kat. And also on behalf of the organizing team, Renz, Kat, and yours truly, to give us our acknowledgement and closing remarks, we have Renz. Renz?
Thank you so much, Karen. Well, indeed, an AI-enabled and empowered government can generate long-term benefits for public government interactions, such as reimagined service provision, excellent policy-making process, and well-ordered operations. Although we're aware that AI-empowered governance is still in the process of experimentation and is currently widely used in small-scale samples only, it cannot be denied how relevant and convenient the integration of AI and governance would be. And like what Karen said earlier, today has been a great opportunity for all of us to be able to have an insightful discussion with our experienced and accomplished speakers. And as we bring our discourse to a close, we once again thank all of you for allowing this event to happen, with the hope that this has given you a better perspective of how AI can be integrated into Philippine Governance 2050. And once again, thank you for joining and let us all stay safe. Karen?
Thank you so much for that, Renz. And once again, we thank our dear advisor, Sir Elmer, our panelists, Professor Naval, Sir Ligot, and Sir Raymond, and also to all our attendees. Thank you so much for joining us in exploring artificial intelligence in the Philippine governance. Let me end with Marshall McLuhan's quote: "We shape our tools, and therefore our tools shape us, just like artificial intelligence or AI. And it's up to us how we can use AI in governance and how it can change our lives in the academic field, in the public sector, and even in the private sector." Again, this has been your host, Karen Avenido. Thank you so much, and stay curious, and let's work together in achieving AI, our preferred scenario in AI in Philippine governance. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. All the
Take care.
best. Happy weekend.
Happy
Weekend.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Happy weekend. Ingat po lahat.
Congrats po.
Thank you po.